The stories of Robin Ann Graham, Jeannette Kamahele, Mary Margaret Cook, and Peggy Wynell Byars-Baisden weave together a haunting tapestry of unsolved disappearances, despite occurring in different locations and under varying circumstances. These cases are bound by eerie parallels. Young women vanishing without a trace, often under suspicious circumstances, leaving families and investigators searching for answers decades later. Robin and Jeanette's case draws speculation of a potential link to the infamous Zodiac Killer, while Mary and Peggy's disappearances, though separated by years, share striking similarities. Both mothers of two vanishing from the same small street in Highland City, Florida. Together, these stories shine a spotlight on the fragile intersection of coincidence, suspicion, and tragedy. Each woman's disappearance remains unsolved, a sobering reminder of lives left in limbo and justice yet to be served. And with that, welcome to our Thanksgiving edition. And we will dive right in.
First up, we've got Mary Margaret Cook.
Missing since November the 14th, 1970, and she was from Highland City, Florida. Mary, she was 25, was a stay-at-home mom of two young children. She disappeared after reportedly going Christmas shopping at J.M. Fields in Lakeland, Florida. Her white 59 Cadillac coupe, it was found abandoned in the store's parking lot the next day. And what's weird is her purse, her wallet, and wedding rings were left inside, but $200 was missing. I know, and she may have been pregnant.
Mary may have been pregnant at the time. Also, foul play has been suspected, with investigators focusing on her husband, Earl Cook. And I'll go over some of Earl Cook's information with you, but just real brief, just so that everybody knows. At the time of her disappearance, Mary Margaret Cook was around 4'11", 145 to 150 pounds. Like you said, she may have been pregnant at the time of her disappearance. She was indeed 25 years old. Interestingly, she was considered biracial. She was Caucasian and Native American, brown hair, blue hazel eyes, and at the time she wore cat-like eyeglasses, and really, like me, can't see without them.
Yeah.
And she had excellent teeth, and in 1997 or 1970, never needed dental care.
Wow.
Birthmark on the outside of her right thigh and above her ankle. Now, interestingly enough, her husband, Leatherin Earl Cook, was considered prime suspect.
Wow. Big surprise.
Yeah. Hey, Earl.
Hey, he was fast.
Yeah, another Earl.
Earl's gotta go.
Nah, we need a break. Okay. Earl was interviewed extensively, and in 2003, the police dug up the garage floor of the house.
Oh, wow.
That they lived in 1970.
Wow.
What they were doing, they suspected Mary's body might be buried there.
But they found nothing.
Yeah, Earl also provided a blood sample, and there's no evidence found. And so Earl was never charged.
We know Earl did it.
Yeah. He always maintained his innocence in her case and told their children that Mary left of her own accord.
Now, why would he say that?
Well, he's got some things to cover up, it looks like, I guess. Speculating.
It is speculation, all speculation.
Earl remarried 2 years after Mary's disappearance, got divorced in 2000, married a third time,
Oh,
and died in Green Acres, Florida in 2007
wow.
at the ripe old age of 66. But see, here's where it gets interesting. Mary's oldest son stated he had seen his parents arguing on the day of his mother's disappearance.
He might have seen. How old were his children? Did it say?
I really didn't get a chance to dive in and get the age of the children, but he
Sounds like he might have. He remembers more.
Yeah. Then, yeah, as time has went on, or however it was, but the thing of it is that at that time his dad told him not to look outside.
That is really
Okay. So, and we all know that thoughts can mess with you. You know, memories, our perception of our memories can change over time, and we may not exactly remember something as it happened.
yeah.
I mean, that does happen.
But that's a real strange statement to remember.
Yeah. And what her oldest son has went on record to say is he believes her body, Mary, was concealed in a red blanket that came from their house, and she was buried within some hours distance of Highland City, Florida.
Wow. So he buried the body. Earl knew what he was doing.
Yeah. Earl pretty sharp about this.
And that's why he didn't mind giving a blood sample or anything else, because he knew.
Yeah.
This is speculation, but he knew. I mean, I'm of the mindset when Earl died.
Maybe the truth went with him.
Yeah.
And see, that's the other thing. We don't have any concrete evidence to point at Earl other than they had somewhat of a rocky relationship or a rocky marriage. So we really don't know.
But the child remembered.
Yeah, he definitely is remembering something. And
but now I don't know that the child would know unless they went with them and they didn't know what they were going with,
well,
depending on the age.
We talk about it all the time. Every parent, I don't know one parent who doesn't think, well, our child won't remember that. And they do.
They remember a lot more than we give them credit for.
After this, Mary's mother took care of her sons, Mary's sons, for some time after her disappearance. But when she found out the police suspected Earl was involved, she confronted him.
Oh, no.
And directly asked, hey, did you kill my daughter? Did you kill Mary? He never answered her. He wouldn't answer her.
Why?
Guilty. I mean, that's what it looks like to me, right?
Yes, okay, did he keep the grandchildren away from her?
Well, he never answered her, but he simply took the children and left. And we talked about that she was buried within some distance of Highland City, and we also know that she lived in Highland City,
okay? As well as Miss Peggy Wynell Byars-Baisden.
Yeah. And what's interesting here is she disappeared 5 years earlier.
In 1965, April the 2nd, to be exact.
Yeah. And that's, that is that a coincidence? And we'll dig a little bit further into it, but I mean, it makes you wonder, I mean, is this a coincidence, or is there something else going on?
Peggy, she was missing from Highland City, also Florida. Peggy, she was 23, was a waitress and single mother of 2 children.
Interestingly, Mary Margaret Cook only had 2 children.
Hmm.
And when you go back and research it, some of the research says she was a single mother, and some of it says she was married. So the probability lays in the middle. They were probably separated at the time.
Probably. and she was last seen leaving her home to visit the Chatterbox Bar near Eaton Park.
Wow.
Witnesses saw her in the bar's parking lot with a man who appeared to be helping her with car trouble. She had a light green 1959 Chevrolet Coupe, and it disappeared that night and has never been located.
Yeah. Now that light green two-door 1959 Chevrolet Coupe, it bore the Florida license plates number at that time of 5W21118. And a witness puts Peggy in the establishment parking lot sometime during the evening hours, like you just talked about, being accompanied by an unidentified Caucasian male, and he appeared to be assisting her, but she'd never been heard from since.
In her family, they describe her as having no enemies and being devoted to her children.
Yeah, and she was actually reported missing the same day.
Oh, she was?
Yeah, reported missing the same day. She was divorced, 2 young children, and she made her living as a waitress. So she probably went out for a night out with her friends, kind of let her hair down a little bit. Maybe she had car trouble. I don't know. Maybe she was set up to have car trouble.
No, that's a possibility too.
Yeah. But the thing of it is that when you really break this down,
the similarities between both of the cases.
Yeah.
Both Mary and Peggy were young mothers of 2 children,
Mm-hmm.
lived on the same street in Highland City, Florida, disappeared under suspicious circumstances.
Yeah. That's what's weird. There's a 5-year period here, but they both fit the same thing. They live in the same city on the exact same street.
That is. What are the odds?
They're both,
somebody on that street.
Yeah, and they're both young. I mean.
Yeah, 23 and 25.
Yeah, and they're both petite. You remember Margaret Cook was like 4'11", and Peggy, her date of birth's July the 1st, 1941. She was 23 years old at the time. She was only 5'4" and 120 pounds. So both of them are petite.
Yes, they are.
And what makes this interesting is, like we said, when you look at the similarities here on the same street, the same MO, but
it's unclear if they knew each other.
Yeah,
and they've not linked the cases.
Yeah, but isn't that kind of odd? In a 5-year period, on the exact same street,
never been found.
Neither one of them's ever been found. They both were, for all intent and purposes, single mothers. Both of them were petite. They don't look alike.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can't really say,
it was
a type or whatever.
Yeah.
The only thing you can factor in there is they're both small.
Yeah.
Easy to grab.
Very easy.
So, just for giggles, wonder if Earl knew Peggy.
That's what I was getting ready to say. Earl might have been more than just a whole husband who liked to.
Maybe. Again, we're speculating.
Yes, because we don't want any of Earl's family to come and say, no, we're not accusing him. But they lived on the same street.
Yeah, in a 5-year period.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I did the digging on that, I did the digging in between that 5-year period to see if there were any more.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't really find anything. But, we're talking so long ago, it's hard to find that information.
Yes. When did bleep? I bleeped his name out. Move. And then
I know, right? Did it pick up on the new street that he moved on? So
yeah.
it makes you wonder.
And we'll be back in 2 minutes and 2 seconds. We're back, and I hope We both hope everybody is having or has had a happy Thanksgiving. And let's get right back into it with Miss Robin and Graham. Interestingly enough, she disappeared the same day as Mary Cook, November the 14th, 1970, though the cases are not believed to be related.
Wow. Yeah, because one's in California, one's in Florida, but it's interesting they disappeared on the exact same day.
Very.
Wow.
She was 18. It was last seen after her boyfriend's car stalled southbound on the Hollywood Freeway near Santa Monica Boulevard and Vermont Avenue around 2 a.m. She called her parents for help, but highway patrolmen later saw her speaking with an unidentified Caucasian male in his mid-20s, approximately 5'8", wearing a white turtleneck and bell-bottom trousers. The witnesses also reported that the man helping start the car, after which Robin willingly entered his prime light blue 1957-1960 Corvette hardtop. Neither she nor the man was seen again.
You know, we go back to her going missing on the exact same day as Mary Cook, the exact same day and year, just in two different states.
Yep.
And then we go over Mary and Cook. And, you know, interestingly, as we eventually lead up to Jeannette Kamahele, it's interesting the connection between these two women.
It is.
The first two lived on the same street.
Mm-hmm.
The third woman, Robin Ann Graham, went missing the exact same day as Mary Margaret Cook. Now, guys, we're not trying to paint a picture of them all being victims of a serial killer. We're just painting the picture of the fact that this is such a huge coincidence.
A huge coincidence, but that's back then.
That's where we're at.
People, they went and they hitchhiked all the time. There was no fear.
Yeah. And it's interesting enough too, you know, we made the comment that she called her parents for help. Well, another person took the call. Her parents weren't in at that time.
They took the call.
I can't remember offhand. Seems like she might have called the neighbor or something at that point. But that's so much different in 1970 versus now, where we have cell phones and we have instant access. But back then, she wouldn't have had that. So
she had to walk somewhere.
Not being able to get up with her parents really wasn't that big a deal.
No.
You know, and you in our lifetime know what that's like as well, growing up in the late 70s and the 80s.
Yeah, it was, nobody was really scared. I mean,
and what's interesting in this case here is that it's the fact that the way she disappeared, okay? It's one of those things to where there is a good possibility that Robin Ann Graham could be associated with Jeannette Kamahele, which we're going to get to here in a minute, by proxy of there are at least 3 different serial killers who are at work in this part of the world
at this time.
And that would be
the Zodiac.
That would also be Ted Bundy.
Mm-hmm.
And that would also be the hitchhiker killer who was targeting women who were hitchhiking or could have been stranded in Robin's case.
Yeah.
And that's where they tie together, you know, and we're going to do another podcast at a separate time on those hitchhiking murders.
Yes, I can't wait.
So the crazy part here is that you know, she was seen by an off-duty policeman who offered a ride to her. Okay. But
I'm still not kind of understanding.
But the thing of it is he really wasn't an off-duty policeman. He was pretending to be.
Okay,
enough to be
but
police.
I mean,
He'd
why
also
didn't
offered
they-
rides to other women.
why didn't they look at him, or did they look at him?
Well, they didn't know. I mean, back then, what I'm getting at is
Oh,
the
they didn't-
access of information was
They
not
did
as great.
not. They didn't check. I
Yeah.
got you.
Just wasn't there to for whatever reason, and that's where you get interesting.
Yeah,
Okay?
that's really kind of.
And we're going to talk a little bit about in just a minute about Bruce Davis as he connects. There's a possibility that Bruce Davis, okay, and it's a remote possibility. There's a possibility that he could very well connect with several things here. He could connect with Robin Ann Graham. He could connect with Jeannette Kamahele. And here's why.
Why?
Bruce Davis has been considered at one time or another possibly the Zodiac Killer.
Wow.
But interestingly enough, okay, and again, you've got what they're going on, and we'll get to the book that was written, the Zodiac Manson Connection, or the Manson Family Zodiac Connection, where Howard Davis, no relation to Bruce Davis, but the author of the book, makes these claims. Now, I'm doing a deep dive in this. Bruce nor Manson, who was supposedly the mastermind here, if we go by that theory for the Zodiac.
Okay.
If we go by that theory, none of them had the ability to create the ciphers that the Zodiac had. But it's interestingly enough, around this time, I told you we had Ted Bundy roaming around.
We had
the Zodiac, Hitchhiker Killer, but we also had the Manson family.
Oh, yes. And you know what?
Bruce Davis can be tracked to this area at this time, and it's possible that he could have been there around that time. There have been other women who have broken down, who were offered rides by an off-duty police detective, claiming to be.
Yeah.
And they all pointed to Bruce Davis.
Isn't that just? And they didn't take him seriously.
No. So it's not really known if he's connected to Graham's disappearance, okay? But there is some speculation that she could have been a victim of the Zodiac. Graham disappeared during a full moon, which is when the Zodiac liked to strike.
Well.
And there's also speculation about, like we said, Jeannette Kamahele.
Yeah.
So is the possibility there? I guess you got a whole lot of crazy going on between 1969 and the early 70s in California.
Evidently, I'm glad I didn't live there.
But to just recap for a minute, it is very interesting that Robin Ann Graham went and disappeared on November 14th, 1970, on the exact same day as Mary Cook went and disappeared in Florida. That
is. What are the odds?
Yeah, that's really.
If anybody knows the odds, you can leave us a comment down below.
Yeah, because that's astronomical as far as we're concerned. And with that, we'll lead up into Jeannette Kamahele.
She went missing April the 25th, 1972. She was 20, and she also disappeared while she was hitchhiking on the. You're gonna have to say that for me.
Wow, that's a mouthful right there, isn't it?
Yeah. Cotati. I don't know how to say it. Yeah,
we're going to spell that one, guys. Cotati is the on-ramp off Highway 101. So for our listeners in California, and we know we've got them, according to our analytics report, we appreciate you.
Yes, we do, but don't
hold it against us.
Don't hold it against us, please.
Yeah, don't hold us against us.
And a friend of Miss Kamahele witnessed her being picked up by between a 20 and a 30-year-old Caucasian male with an afro hairstyle, driving a faded brown between 1970 and 1972 Chevy pickup truck.
Yeah.
7 other women were murdered in the area around this time. She was the only victim never found.
And that's where that ties back to she could have been a victim of Ted Bundy
Or the Zodiac
or
Killer.
the Zodiac Killer. Or,
Manson family.
Well, Manson was already in custody.
Okay, well, Bruce Davis.
So it's very interesting that it's possible.
It's very possible.
Now, the thing too is that the vehicle that was described, the pickup truck, it was outfitted with a wooden homemade camper shell. And interestingly enough, she had been living in Japan. Her father came in from Japan trying to help find his daughter.
Oh, wow.
And they were unsuccessful. She was around 5'5", 128 pounds, brown hair, cut off in a shag type style. She was wearing a brown sweater, blue jeans, and a leather sandal. Now, one of the reasons I'm bringing up what everybody was wearing, okay, let's just stretch for a minute and say Jeannette Kamahele and Robin Ann Graham were indeed the victims of a serial killer. The reason we're making mention of the clothing is, think about it for a minute. Serial killers like to keep mementos.
They like to keep, and they like, most of them get a good pattern.
Yeah.
That's
and check this out. Interestingly enough, Ted Bundy, Joseph D'Angelo, and the Night Stalker Richard Ramirez had a habit of keeping mementos. Memorabilia from their victims and giving them away as gifts.
Oh.
So that's one of the reasons we're mentioning that. I mean, it's just, again, but let me dive into this a little bit further for you.
We're going to talk about the witness.
Yeah, go ahead. Now, give me time to pull this up. Go
okay.
ahead.
There was a witness that identified Bruce Davis as a man connected to Robin's case, though his involvement remains speculative at this point. So they're not saying.
Well, here's what this happens. Again, you remember we talked about Howard Davis's book, the Manson Zodiac connection, the Manson family Zodiac connection. Okay. And the connection there is that what he is saying is that law enforcement realized that Bruce Davis was their common denominator. And they're basing this on the fact that he was known to frequent those areas. Okay. There has been some speculation that maybe in the Manson family or in Bruce Davis's possession was a hood like the Zodiac and a hunting knife. But the thing too is that we know from doing research, Bruce Davis was all in the occult.
Okay.
So are you identifying a real Zodiac apparel, or are you saying we found a black robe with a hood and a hunting knife?
Yeah.
I mean, are we stretching a little bit? And like we mentioned earlier, in doing the research, no one in the Manson family compound that we know of, and I'm speaking of Tex Cobb, Bruce Davis, and Charles Manson himself, none of them had the capability or the background that we know of to write these ciphers.
Yeah, because like you said, a lot of stuff weren't documented down. I mean, there's not as much easy access to things as it used to be.
But at the same time, in the Manson killings, when Sharon Tate and the Folgers and all those were murdered, cryptic messages were sprawled upon the walls for attention. The Zodiac wanted attention, so he would write letters,
Yes.
create ciphers. But is that saying there's a connection there, or are we just stretching a little bit? And from doing my research, I think that's a stretch.
It probably is a stretch.
I mean, what they're going by is a criminal history, a geographical presence, and an overlap in time frames.
Nothing definitive ties
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah. So, I mean, at this particular time, you know, is it that big of a stretch to make this connection? Not really. But could it all be a cover up? The conspiracy theorist in me said, yeah, it could be. Because check this out. The Manson family trial, they had already spent over $1 million building the evidence for this trial.
That's why they wanted it all.
That's the premise of the book, of Howard Davis's book, is that they decided to cover this up and say, hey, look, we've got enough evidence here to lock all these Manson cult people away. They're going to stay locked away.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to label it as this is what you're guilty of, and this is what you're going to jail for. And we don't have to bring up the Zodiac. I can see that to a point, but you're dealing with some high octane attorneys here who want all the notoriety that they can get. Why wouldn't one of them pop out and say, hey, not only have we solved the LaBanca Tate murders, but we've also solved the Zodiac murders. And I just can't see that being kept under lock and key.
I can't either. That doesn't.
I just
there would have been something leaked out eventually.
Yeah. I just can't. And even the Manson prosecutor, Vince Belusky, if I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm sorry. He always refuted the theory. And this was a go-getter. I mean, this was a guy, hey, I'm going to get you for everything I can get you for.
And if he thought he could have got him for that, he would have. But at the same time, he didn't see it.
Yeah. Yeah. And back to the hood and knife, I mean, at this point, we really don't know. We do know that Bruce Davis was into some occult activities. I think they all were experimenting with because
the
occult, because you got to think here in this time frame, we're in the 70s or late 60s, early 70s. You've got the hippie movement, the age of Aquarius. You've got all these things going on. There's the Wiccans, the pagans. There's a lot of interest in witchcraft and the occult. And it's at the very beginning of what we would know growing up as the Satanic Panic.
Yeah.
So I don't really, it's very interesting when you look through it. I mean, it could be. It could
very well be.
But it looks like there might be a stretch there.
Yes.
It's all circumstantial at this point. I mean, the geographical overlap is there for Davis. Similar criminal profiles. I mean, he had a history of violence. He'd been convicted of murders already connected to the Manson family. His participation, he was driven by an ideal, just like the Zodiac.
Mm-hmm.
The Zodiac kept saying, I'm killing these so that I have my slaves in paradise. And it's just interesting how they would go. But the thing there, though, is the Manson murders were sloppy. So were the Zodiac, but he had more of a methodical plan to it, it seemed,
Yeah.
But according to the premise of the book, information or evidence had been suppressed. And that's what happened. And there we go, but again, all that behavior and alleged possessions, it's unsubstantiated. We really, really don't know,
But both women, they're connected by disappearing under suspicious circumstances involving unidentified men offering assistance.
Yeah.
They're considered possible, and we say possible, victims of the Zodiac Killer. No definitive link has been established.
I think as we set this up for part 2, as we come to an end of our podcast here. I think that the true victims here for these women here and all the other women that were victims of that disappeared, that were hitchhiking around this time, Jeannette Kamahele and Robin Ann Graham, I suspect that they probably are victims of this hitchhiker murder.
I think that could be, yep, that could very well be.
And that's where I'm going with this. And we'll save that for part 2, guys.
Because there will be a part 2 as we are getting ready to go enjoy our Thanksgiving feast.
But guys, we just wanted to put a podcast out for you.
And we wanted to say Happy Thanksgiving.
And give you something to think about. And again, guys, think about the coincidental nature of these cases, okay? You've got Mary Margaret Cook, disappeared November 14th, 1970, followed by Peggy Baisden, April 2nd, or actually she was the first, April 2nd, 1965. Both of these women disappeared from Highland City, Florida, but they lived on the same street, around the same age, both mothers of 2 small children. That's just weird.
That to me is eerie.
And as we recap, it brings us back to Robin Ann Graham, November 14th, 1970, again in Florida, but I mean, in California, but she disappeared the same day Mary Margaret Cook did.
They had a long way to go to get there.
Yeah, a long way, but that's just so crazy the way evil works in this world.
It is very crazy how it does.
So she disappeared, and there's a possibility she is a victim of Ted Bundy, the hitchhiker murderer, or the Zodiac, or Bruce Davis.
Yeah.
Same with Jeannette Kamahele, who's never been found.
None of these have been found.
Yeah, none of them. And that's where we go from there, you know. And with that, guys, you know, we talked about this. They all disappeared under suspicious circumstances
involving unidentified men offering assistance.
Yeah. And are there possible connections with the Zodiac Killer? We don't know. We don't know. There's speculation there. But guys, once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. And from our family to yours.
We will see you next time.
Buckles Berry Lemonade.
The podcast.